Hello, welcome back to my studio and welcome to Project 8 out of Arthur Stern's book, How to See Color and Paint It. If you're unaware, this is part of a playlist where I basically walk through this entire book. I always sell this book as it's like painting 1 and painting 2 in college in one book. Ironically, it's out of print, which means it's really hard to get a hold of the physical copy, although I heard that there are e-copies. Out of kind of like respect for this book, I am spending this year going through each project with you guys here on YouTube and of course in my online art school. More about that later. But basically today is where we're tying a lot of things together that we've learned so far. So if you want to check those out, look at the playlist. But we've already painted an object that was white and we showed how multi-dimensional it actually is. We've also painted an object that's black and had a similar, hopefully, insight about how black isn't always 100% black. And so why might this be helpful for you as a painter? A very small amount of what we paint is actually about getting the exact color, right? So you might think, if you're really new to painting, that if you had a tool where you had like a color spectrometer that perfectly analyzed color and you could hold it up to the object and get the actual color and then perfectly color match it, that all of your problems would be solved as a painter. But the thing is, that's only the starting point. At most, that's half of what you're doing. The rest of it is interpreting the color of the thing as well as the atmospheric perspective, as well as the soft edges, as well as the bounce light, as well as the cast shadows. There are so many other things that you have to take into account, which is why there's the statement, paint what you see and not what you know. We know that there's a color of these scissors and that this is orange, but when you paint it, it might actually be red, it might be brown, it might be yellow, it might be cream color, depending on the light and the atmosphere and the vibe and all of these other things that are anchored in representational painting. That is to say, it's not just when you're wanting to go abstract or do something more stylistic. Even if you're wanting to paint something super accurately, things are rarely the color that they are. The other thing we're learning is how to paint gradients. You can see in this reference photo that there is a gradient from the ground being red and how it's casting a shadow onto both the black piece of paper and the white box. And I always say to my online art school students, gradients are instantly sort of like sexy. It's the best way I can describe it. But basically it not only adds, of course, realism, because in real life, colors bounce and those colors are usually in gradient. Light casts and it's usually in a gradient. But also because there's something about gradients that looks really nice. So the lesson from today is applicable not only if you're wanting to paint more realistically, but also it's just a good thing to have under your belt. Of course, this demo starts with our first observation. Arthur Stern really asks us to build things simply, to develop simple color observations. So we do our initial drawing, and then he has us just find one color for each surface. So the background, the sidewall, the ground, and of course, he says also to paint in the cast shadow. Basically, that there's enough difference between the lit ground, let's say the red lit ground, and then the darker red shadow being cast, because it is so visually present, we have to include it. The one thing I'll say about this initial block and that I thought was really interesting is that when I was painting it, the black piece of construction paper that I taped to the front and to the side, they're the center part of the box. The black part on the front that's in the full light was the exact same color as the white that's in the shadow. And this is significant because when you first start learning color theory, you're often exposed to the value optical illusions first. I'll insert one here with the checkerboard and the cast shadow. And that's because the human eye is notoriously not very good at picking up value. Our eye automatically projects light onto things. So you might think that, oh, I just need to know what the color of the ground is. But really, understanding that your eye is going to play tricks on you and that it's going to correct for light, meaning that even though the side color is the same as the black, because we see and understand it as a light effect happening, our brain will read it as white, even if it's very, very dark. But the thing is, that is a tricky thing to work through when you're mixing the paint and painting on something. But the nice thing I always encourage and tell my students is the viewer wants to understand you. The viewer wants to catch what you're throwing, to smell what you're cooking, so to speak. And the reason why this is helpful is because you are sort of breaking down the world away from just painting it as you know it. This is a white box and this is a red ground, right? You're implying shadow, you're building form, you're creating these gradients because that's what's physically happening, but you're trusting that the audience will read that dark in context to the rest of the shadow and the darkening of the black panel as a shadow version of white. So you only have to do one half the equation. Paint what you see and not what you know. Use the color checker tool, the little piece of cardboard with the hole poked out. Use the heart glasses to check your values. Just paint what you see in front of you, and don't worry if it feels counterintuitive. You're like, hey, I'm mixing a white box color and for some reason it's purple, but I'm gonna trust. And that's the thing, trust what you see, not what you know. Arthur Stern asks us in observation 2 to break down the colors. So where there was one color for the yellow wall and one color for the ground, one color for the white part of the box and one for the black part, he asked us to break those into 4 to 6 different, more subtle variations. And the reason we do this is because our initial block-in gives us the foundation. I even have some students who are very perfectionist, who I will encourage them to think of the underpainting, the initial block-in, where things are very, very simple, right? Our drawing is pretty found, but our value and our color are pretty simple, rounded down, the average of all the lit. And I tell them that it's just an underpainting so they get out of their head, because you're gonna start to see all the little gradients and you're gonna start to see the texture and you're gonna get to see the little details. Resist the urge, hit snooze on those details and just go in with the general. And at this point, we can start finding the more subtle undulations, right? You might notice on that yellow wall that towards the bottom, it's more of a sunflowery, warm yellow. And as it goes to the top, it might become more cool with hints of green in it. You can start to mix those subtle variations. At the greenest part, mix a green. At the yellowest part, mix some orange in. And just by adding those two in, all of a sudden we've created a level of dimensionality that starts to make this look really realistic. Similarly, on the lit part of the white front face of the box where the light is directly hitting it, you'll notice that towards the bottom, there's almost a pinkish hue, and that's because the red light is bouncing back. This is one thing I notice that students don't always take into account, or they notice it at the very end and they slap it on like a sticker. Let the reflected light be part of the entire process. A big mistake I see students make is they just focus on painting the thing. I'm painting a pear, an apple, a pair of scissors, whatever. And then they'll look and they'll see, oh, there's shadow and there's bounce light and there's highlight, and they'll kind of slap those on like stickers. Whereas if you sort of build it into your painting practice from earlier, and you really do, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but paint what you see, really stay locked in, one look, one mark. If you can do those things, they begin to look more organic, and you're gonna get that more realistic look that painters who painted for a while and really are locked in on these things do well. And then finally, as we get to our final level of observation, you'll notice that the marks that I'm making are much smaller at this point. I'm just kind of what feels like noodling. I always say that word, just like little details, hemming and hawing. On camera, when I watch this over and look at the edits, I'm always like, oh, it doesn't look like I'm doing much. But this is that subtle maneuvering of just slightly warmer, slightly cooler, slightly darker, slightly lighter, slightly muted, whatever, right? We're just kind of undulating. And it's not a lot of space because we've already done a good job building our foundation, right? Think of it like a pyramid. We're gonna make the biggest marks and the most dynamic statements with our first round, but we're keeping it simple so that we can move quickly and build that solid foundation. Our middle stage is gonna still be big-ish movements, right? We're breaking things down, but they're going to be a little more tuned in and a little more subtle. But by the time we get to the end, we're making lots of subtle little tweaks and adjustments and including a little bit more information here and there. And it's usually in these little tiny movements and brush marks and palette knife scrapes and all of that, that you do start to have, almost as though it is emerging from the fog, this level of realism that begins to emerge. The thing that I would impart on you in this video is to remember to be patient. But we can see in the finished product that especially where there's white, the color is a lot more present. That is to say that the pink that is radiating from the bottom of the box where the red ground bounce light is happening is a lot more dynamic, where black, because black absorbs more of the light, it's a little more subtle. And it's things like this that if you notice when you're painting, you can kind of put that away in like a metaphorical little backpack. Notice that when something is darker, the light effect is less strong. When something is closer to white, or certainly if it's really shiny and has a specular quality to it, it's gonna be more dramatic. And just by picking up and noticing those little things, you are gonna be able to build the repertoire, the database, whatever you want to call it, of understanding your physical world that is going to make this easier and easier, and you're going to build upon this knowledge and become an expert painter. People often think when they see something that looks realistic, I could never do that. They see the world differently, but it is the simple foundations. Paint what you see, average your colors, start from general to specific, all these things that sound very rudimentary, painting 101, but it's these things done well and at scale and in repetition that makes you a good painter. That's why I'm so passionate about teaching, because it's like there's not smoke and mirrors. It's not a hidden skill. Like painting painting representationally, there's an objective quality to it, and if you can stay really intentional and dogged with your practice, like anyone can learn to paint. I really believe that. If you're still here and you really enjoyed that and you want to watch me paint this in real time and talk through what I'm doing and answer your questions in the chat, then you should become a lifetime member of my online art school, Not Sorry Art School. I created it 6 years ago, and it started with a foundation course, How to Paint 101, and I have built it up since then because it's really meant to be more like a traditional art school with the foundations and supplementary lessons, things like how to paint water, architectural landscape, how to do portraiture, as well as things like master studies, which incorporate art history. And I just released Applied Color Theory, which is a hands-on, exercise-led way of learning color theory, where it's no longer intuitive, but rather something we can all learn. I teach you things like how color is subjective, walking you through exercises by Joseph Albers. Of course, we construct and understand a color wheel to understand our pigments and our tools. And finally, we bring it all together by understanding the relationship between color and light. I'm always adding new courses and communicating with my students. So if you really want to invest in yourself and become the painter you know you are, then I definitely recommend checking it out. And you can use this discount code in order to get a limited time discount on becoming a lifetime member. I know you'll love it. It's so fun. There's a great community over there and so much to learn. As always, thank you for being here and watching this video. I hope you get to go on and create wonderful things. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.